Hello everybody and welcome to the first Sunday Night Live of 2023. I hope everybody has had a fantastic Christmas and a good New Year's Hogmanay time. The Hogmanay show was fantastic. I had such a lot of fun and you guys were fantastic. It was really, really good fun. And I think I was on like the second bottle of champagne by the time I started the show, so I apologize if I was just a wee modicum incoherent. Fairly good reasons for it. But yeah, it was lots and lots of fun to do, and it's a tradition that we've had going since I think about 2017, I think, or 2018, I think it was. When we started doing the Hogmanay show. And for those of you that don't know what Hogmanay is, basically it's what we call New Year's Eve here in Scotland. So I've always called it Hogmanay. It's just, that's what we call it here. So there's no rhyme or reason. It's just a Scots word for the end of the year, basically. And it's just a rather grand party, to be honest. So there you go. Sean White is asking what the pre-show music is. What's that tune? Yes, it is one of my own tunes called Flip Flops, which I wrote and recorded many years ago, like 1993 or 1994 with a band I had at the time. And yeah, so I thought, why not just use it, or at least use part of it, an edited version of it, for my theme tune. But there you go. Bob says at least you didn't sleep through it. Aye, yes, that's true. Yeah, there are people that, you know, it's just like New Year's is just hey, it's just the end of another year. You know, they're not really that into it, and I understand that. I really do. My parents are like that. They'll just like be like, okay, yeah, it's just the end of another year and the start of another new one. Whatever. And so, you know, they're in bed by 10 o'clock, and that's fine. My kids this year, because, you know, they're 10 and 13, they wanted to stay up. And they did. They actually made it through until midnight, which was pretty cool for both of them. And then pretty much as soon as we got to like 10 past midnight, they were just like, okay, we've had enough now. So off they went to bed, and that was that. And then New Year's Day was pretty tame, pretty quiet. So yeah, there you go. Well, I wrote it when I was born in 93. Sean, wow, yeah, that thanks for making me feel old. Yes. I was how old was I was 18 in 1993. There you go. That gives you some idea of how old I am now. And it it does feel like a lifetime ago, 1993, but there it is. And 1993 was the first time I saw Steely Dan, actually. They came over to the UK for their 1996, sorry, not 1993. 1996 was when they had their Art Crimes tour, and that was the first time I saw them. It was not in 1993. I know why I'm confusing it. It's because I saw the Brecker Brothers band in 1993. With Peter Erskine on drums, and then I saw them again in 1994 at Ronnie Scott's. They were there at Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club in London. They were there for a week, for like 7 straight nights. And I only had technically, only had funds to go to the first night. I ended up going to every night, including the Saturday show where they did 2 shows, and I went to everything that they did, and they realized that I was there every night. Both Mike and Randy realized I was there every night, and by the end of it on the Saturday night, they ended up coming over to me and saying, "Hey, you've been here every night," and so we got talking. It was great. But yeah, there we go. Billy Morgan says 29, touring in 1993. Yeah, I had actually been on a tour that summer of 1993. Rich says Ronnie Scott's is an awesome venue. If you're ever in London, you have to go. Absolutely, you absolutely must. There was a while back, I think maybe like 1996 or 1997, where the club very, very nearly went out of business. And there was a drive to basically try and keep it afloat. So I purchased some shares in the club, which I still have. Right. Let's go and see who's actually here, because I've not done that yet. And that's kind of something I kind of always do. So Rich was first in the door, being about 3 hours early, which is incredibly cool. And then Ronald Figura is here, and Paul Morgan. Paul, you and I have been talking in the comments in the community section, which has been nice, and you've been commenting on some of my videos. Thank you for your comments, and it's been good to talk to you. So I'm glad you're here, though. Kyle is here as well. Tony Stringer and Dave at Bob Saying Why is here. Kyle Draduziak, mentioned him already, and Just Bob is here, which is awesome. I'm very glad he is here. And who else do we have? Sean White, who I've already mentioned. John Hawk is here as well. And Billy Morgan is here. And Lawrence is here, which is fantastic. Glad to see you, Lawrence, my friend. Welcome. Happy New Year to you. And that, I think, is it at the moment. So if you are new to the show, you've never seen Sunday Night Live before, the first thing you need to do is subscribe to the channel. And then hit the notification bell and select all notifications. Once you've done those, within about 10 minutes, sit back, relax, watch the show for 10 minutes, and then you will be able to comment in the chat. And if you would like to do that, then please do say hello, especially if you are new to the channel. Please do say hello, and I will read out your comment on the show. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, please do what Dave has done, which is put my name in the comment. Basically, if you type at Jonny Lipsham Studios, what that does is that makes it doesn't show it for you in the chat, but for me, it shows my name up in red, and then I know that it's a question, and I can just kind of separate it out from everything else that's in the chat. I'm absolutely happy for everybody just to chat amongst themselves whilst I'm dealing with questions. That's cool. You guys are very, very happy to do that because you guys are all very nice and friendly with each other. Old School Funk and Soul is here as well. Who mentions that Ronnie Scott's in Birmingham closed a while back. Yes, it did. Very sadly, it did. And he says, finally got my Studio One 6 Pro upgrade. Yes. Very glad to hear that, mate. Very glad. And glad I could help you with that, too. Let's see. Sound Science is here, says Tim is here, Mr. Facebook Groups. Tim, very glad to have you here. Welcome. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And Johnny Gibe and myself, we pretty much run the Persona Studio One Facebook group now. So you are more than welcome to come back, and we would gladly welcome you back with open arms, for sure. So if you would like to do that, then please do just go ahead and join the group once more and answer the questions, and we'll let you in, no problem. All right, so we'd be glad to do that. All right, so just by way of refresher, most people who are here know this, but studio, why did I say studio? That's not what I meant to say at all. Sunday Night Live is essentially a question and answer show where I will answer or endeavor to answer all of your questions about Studio One. That's kind of the primary focus. It's all about Studio One and mixing, mastering, recording, performing, and all of that fun stuff inside of Studio One. That's what it's about. However, I will also take some questions on music theory as well, and composing and songwriting and arranging and things like that. But the primary focus is Studio One. And so we do already have a question, which is Dave's question, which I'm going to get to right now. But if you do have a question, as I said, stick it in the chat and, just put my name in the chat and it will show up in red. And that'd be cool. And anonymous, I can't even say it. And I haven't had anything to drink. You wouldn't believe it, but I haven't had anything to drink. Anyway, anonymous housewife is here. Take 3. And she says, hello, friends and fiends. Hello to you too, my dear. I'm glad you're here. All right, so let's get to that question. And Keith is here as well. Is that right? Yeah, Keith Chadwick is here from Canada. He's here as well. I missed him. Sorry about that. All right, Dave says, I will offer a question. Are you comfortable with harmonic minor scale? I kind of get it, but the math seems to oppose my hearing. There are 2 minor scales. For those of you that aren't aware, there are 2 main minor scales. There are other modes, but there are 2 minor scales predominantly. So, the first one is the melodic minor, which basically only has the 1 in the key of C minor. Anyway, has the 1 accidental because we have the leading tone. And we have the natural 6 as well. So it's basically like a major scale, but with the flat 3rd. All right, and then you have the other one, where you have the flat 6, but you also have the leading tone, which is the B natural. Now, the key of C minor has 3 flats. It shares its key signature with the key of E flat major. So that then begs the question, how do I know the difference? How do I discern the difference between something that's written in E flat major and something that's written in C minor? Well, there are a couple of clues. One very obvious one being, look for the start or the end of a phrase, and usually a phrase will end on the tonic, the root. That being a C minor is going to, in C minor, is going to have a C there. The other thing to look out for is that leading tone, that B natural. So if you start seeing lots of B naturals appearing in the score, then it's a fairly safe bet that it's in the key of C minor and not the key of E flat major. If there are chord symbols are going to give the game away straight away. But if all you've got is a melody line in your score, then those are the things to look out for. The B naturals, and look out for the C's. If you're seeing the C's at starts and ends of phrases, then it's most likely going to be in C minor. So, the harmonic minor scale has the flat 3, the flat 6, but it has the major 7. And it's probably the darker of the 2 sounding minor scales. Now it's a little bit darker and a little bit, it has this really interesting thing about it at the top of the scale, which sounds a little bit maybe Middle Eastern, which gives it its unique flavor. But that's how the harmonic scale goes, and it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool scale. I like it quite a bit, but for most of the time, particularly when I'm playing jazz, I'm using the melodic minor rather than the harmonic minor, for the most part. Bob has a question. He says, what is compound meter in music, and what does that relate to for what we hear as a count? To tap our fingers to, do we gravitate towards a 4/4 type count to make sense? Great question. Really cool. What is compound and what is simple time? Simple time is something like 3/4, 4/4, 2/4, 5/4, 7/4, 9/4, 11/4. Yes, you're probably thinking, those are getting more complex. Yes, complex, but not compound. They are called simple because they are based around duplets or quadruplets. What do I mean by that? I mean pairs of eighth notes or sets of 4 or groups of 8 eighth notes. Unless you're dealing with something like 7/4, for example, where you're still dealing with pairs of eighth notes predominantly, but it's all based around the quarter note being the pulse. Okay, so 3/4, 2/4, 4/4, those are all quarter note based pulses, and therefore they are simple time. So you get 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, or in 3/4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. Okay, now I'm going to stay with the 3/4 theme for just a minute, because if you were to look at 3/4 and then if you were to look at 6/8, you could argue that they are extremely similar. There are some similarities. This is true because there are 6 eighth notes in both time signatures. So you could argue, maybe you could count them the same. You can. However, that's not how music works, and that's not how we by and largely feel the pulse of music. Pulse of music is based around the perception of a strong downbeat and a weaker upbeat. All right, different genres of music will change this balance of power a little bit. For example, rock music and pop music, it's still pretty much the case that the downbeat beats in a bar of 4/4, beats 1 and 3 are the strong beats, 2 and 4 are the weak beats. Even though the snare drum plays the 2 and the 4, it's the kick drum on beat 1 and 3 that gives that sense of time to something that is rock or pop driven. Okay? When it's jazz, it's a little bit different. The sense of pulse is with the ride cymbal, and each quarter note is even for the most part, but there is emphasis on beats 2 and 4. But all 4 quarter notes are even, but with a slight emphasis on beats 2 and 4. That's genre specific. But if we're talking purely technically about measurement and pulse, then 3/4 and 6/8 appear on paper to look similar, but they're different. 3/4 is simple time, 6/8 is compound time. It's compound time because you have 2 triplets, 2 sets of 3 eighth notes, because that is how compound time works. That's what distinguishes compound time from simple time. Simple time is pairs of eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 6/8, 1 and 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6. Hear my emphasis there. Can you hear the strong downbeats on beat 1 and 4? 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6. That is the pulse emphasis in 6/8. In 3/4 it's 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. The emphasis is on the 1, a little bit less emphasis on the 2, and even less emphasis on the 3. In 6/8 it's 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6. So the thing here is, if you're playing a piece of music that is in 6/8, it might be felt like this. Because those downbeats on beat 1 and beat 4 are so strong, they can be counted as a pulse in their own right, rather than the 6 individual eighth notes. And you would do the same with 9/8, and so on and so forth. Okay, so 6/8, 9/8, 12/8, all that same 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, 12/8, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, 10 11 12, 1 4 5 6 7 8 9, 10 11 12. And that is how things like blues ballads from the 1950s, not all of them are in compound time, most of them are. For example, and that was in 12/8. But so a drummer, if they were playing that, would be going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and they would be counting it as if it's 4/4 with triplets. And a lot of drummers do that, and in fact, a lot of musicians, when they're playing something that's like that, a blues ballad in 12/8, that's how they will feel it. They'll count it off even as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so they would feel it as if it's 4/4 but with triplet based time. But technically it's in 12/8. There are 12 eighth notes in that meter. And so that's what distinguishes that from something like 3/4. See how that has a duplet 1 and 2 and 3 and kind of sound to it? So that's where compound and simple time are kind of separate and distinct. Now, where this gets really, really interesting, and this is where it gets a little bit more advanced, is if you mesh together or do a mashup of compound and simple time together. So take those groups of 3s and those groups of 2s and put them together in random groupings. And you can come up with some pretty zany time signatures. And it's a lot of fun to play music like that. If you go to places like Turkey and that part of Europe getting into what used to be the Ottoman Empire, you will find that kind of music all over the place, where there are groups of 3 followed by a group of 2, followed by 2 groups of 3, followed by another group of 2. And there are ways in which you can count those time signatures without actually having to count each one of the beats. And this is what they do, particularly in Turkish music. They do this quite a bit. Although I've anglicized what they do, but they have 3-syllable word for the triplets and a 2-syllable word for the duplets. And so what I would do to anglicize that is I take the word house, which is ordinarily monosyllabic, and I would extend the E part of house and make it into a 2-syllable word. So I'd go housey. And that takes care of the duplet. And then, just for fun, I need a 3-syllable word, so I would use triangle. And so you put these rhythms together and you can get some really interesting time signatures. You can have like triangle, 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 housey, housey, triangle, triangle, housey, triangle, 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 housey, 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 triangle, triangle, housey, triangle, housey, triangle, housey, housey, triangle. And before you know it, you're playing really, really complex music. And sometimes you can put a straight ahead 4/4 drum beat as the kind of underlying pulse for this. And actually in Turkish pop music, that's what they do. They have a straight rock beat, believe it or not. And then they have these interesting duplet and triplet subdivisions over the top, played by the lead instruments or sung by the vocal. It's wonderful music. It's great fun to play. And there you go. That is the long answer. That's actually my undergrad university lecture answer to the question about compound meter. But that was a great question. Let's see, what else do we have? DJ Vu is here. Hello, good to see you. Welcome. Happy New Year to you too. He says, I like the rhythmic divisions of ethnic music that are not as obvious and predictable as in well-known music genres. Correct, me too. Just Bob then goes on to say, is compound meter the basis for jazz and a lot of experimental music of Frank Zappa and Captain Beefheart, for example? Yeah, Frank Zappa was an interesting one because for as much as his music was very, very heavily jazz influenced, it was also very heavily funk influenced and pretty heavily rock influenced as well. His music was wickedly complex to play, and I love his music. And he did make use of some interesting time signatures. Like, for example, you'd be going along perfectly happily playing a funky groove in 4/4 and really getting into it. And you just played like 15 measures of straight 4/4 funk. And then this is like one bar of 5/8. And then you're back into 4/4 again. And it's just like, what was that there for? It's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2. You're into the last 4 measures of this funk groove. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. What the heck was that for? But it's all part of what made Zappa's music fun and engaging for musicians to play, and also if you are musically inclined as a listener to listen to and engage with. But yeah, there you go. Dave says, ride, as my opinion, as in cymbal, is the 1 and a 2 to keep the top end of the big band to stay ahead of the beat. You're kind of semi-right. You're a good 2/3 of the way right. The jazz ride cymbal pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. That came from drummer Philly Joe Jones. Before then, you had either a pressed roll on beats 2 and 4 to give emphasis, and a tap on 1 and 3, just on a snare drum, with the kick drum very lightly on all 4 beats. So that's where the 4 to the floor in disco music comes from. It comes directly from the music of the 1920s and 1930s with the pulse on the kick drum. And then this press roll thing on 2 and 4. And then Philly Joe Jones came along, and first of all, it was kind of the emphasis had moved away from the snare drum and now onto the hi-hat. So the rhythm was a little bit less militaristic and a little bit lighter, and you got this ting 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 on the hi-hat. Philly Joe Jones realized that the music was becoming, the tempo thresholds of the music was becoming much broader. So some tunes were really fast, and playing that on the hi-hat was a little bit clunky, no pun intended. So he moved it to the ride cymbal. And what he did was he took that kind of pattern from the hi-hat and extended it a little bit. And what he did was he made the quarter note the main event on the ride cymbal. And then he would just drop his stick in between beats 1 and in between the beats. So basically you get 1, 2, drop the stick for the skip beat. So you get 1, 2, drop 3, 4, drop 1, 2, drop 3, 4. So basically the skip beat, which is what he called that ta-ting bit, was the skip beat. And he made that really, really light. So the quarter note was the main pulse. Ting, 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 with the hi-hat played on 2 and 4, with the foot kick drum very, very lightly feathered on all 4 beats. And that skip beat really light. And that's how it was. And all the way through the late 1920s, all the way through the 1930s, until you get to Max Roach. When Max Roach, basically, the tempo was now, people were playing at 350, 360 beats a minute. You can't do that. So he made it even lighter. And this time the stick would practically just dance on top of the cymbal. If you ever watched videos of Max Roach play, That's what you'll see at those kind of crazy tempos. And it's just like the stick is just dancing like this on the cymbal. So that's where that ride cymbal pattern comes from. Charlie Dillon is here. He says, hi to all. Regarding the adjust loudness option in digital release, does this option just alter the volume amount for the whole track in one hit, or is there more to it? When you're doing a digital release, you are basically doing a mix down of your main output in Studio One. So when you go into those settings for, I'm assuming you're talking about, when you say digital release, you're talking about the project page. And you now have those project page things in export mixdown. So if you go into song, export mixdown, I can show you this. And what you'll have here is these loudness things. These were introduced into the project page, first of all. And if you check this box, when you do either digital release in the project page or you do export mixdown, and I've disappeared. There we are. I'm back. In either case, whether you're doing this in the song page or the project page, this basically sets the limit basically of the maximum loudness and the true peak, the maximum true peak level for whatever you're exporting it to. So if you're exporting it to SoundCloud, the maximum loudness is going to be minus 14 LUFS. And then the maximum true peak is going to be minus 1 dB. And the reason why you have the true peak to minus 1 dB is to prevent intersample peaking. So this is kind of, it will adjust the loudness of your main output. Now, if your main output is nowhere near the minus 14 LUFS, then nothing's going to happen. There's not going to be any adjustment. If your your true peak is nowhere near minus 1 dB, then nothing again will happen. But as you can see, there are all of these options here. So YouTube is pretty much the same. So anytime I'm uploading something to YouTube, that's what I set it at. And then you've got Amazon Alexa, if you've got one of those. The true peak there is -2. Apple Music is -16, or true peak of -1. And so basically that's what it does. They're just kind of little presets to make sure that when you upload your music to any of these platforms here, that you are within the guidelines for their loudness normalization that each one of these platforms have. And what I mean by that is all of these platforms, they employ different loudness management or loudness normalization, which basically means your song is going to be no louder than anything else that is in the playlist. So when you upload to SoundCloud, the next song that comes up, and you know how it is at the bottom of the screen, it comes up and it plays whatever is next. And that might not be your next tune on your page. It might be something else completely at random. And basically what this means is that your song is not going to be any louder than the next one that is queued up. And likewise, the next one that's queued up is not going to be louder than yours. So it kind of sets this limit where everything is going to not be any louder than this volume, this level. And so all of these platforms have all of these different things. Now, if your music is louder than this value, then what the platform will do is they will use a limiter, which is why I kind of did this with my hand. They will use a limiter and they will tap down the volume of your song so that it meets their normalization standards. And that usually is using a limiter set to infinity in its ratio, which means it's pretty aggressive. So if your music is exceptionally loud, for example, and your max loudness is like -4 LUFS, then you're going to lose 12 dB of dynamic range effectively, because they will just tap your music down by 12 dB. And it will totally squish all the dynamics out of your music altogether. So that's what that's there for. Um, so yeah, this kind of enables your music to conform to those normalization standards, is what it does. Okay, I hope I've explained that well enough. My colleague Joe has got a video on it as well. Now, the whole loudness normalization thing that we've employed in Studio One is actually fairly hotly debated by mastering engineers in particular. So there's still a lot of improvements to make, not just from the persona's point of view, but also there's still a long way to go on actually agreement within the industry as a whole as to how loudness is managed and how loudness is handled to take into account different genres, because there are some genres of music where you want that fat sausage of a waveform. You want it to be squashed. You want there to be no dynamic range in the music at all. And so there's that. And then on the other hand, you've got maybe something like folk music or jazz where, that's not the case at all. You're hardly going to use much in the way of compression. You're hardly going to use much in the way of limiting. And certainly you're not going to do the same kind of master for a jazz record that you will do for something like industrial metal, for example. You're just not. And so the output that goes to something like SoundCloud is going to be very different. And so there is a long way to go with how the loudness wars, if you like, the result and the fallout of the loudness wars is dealt with. These streaming platforms, what they're trying to do, maybe inelegantly, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to find a way where nobody has to reach for the volume control, but at the same time, the dynamic range of people's music is preserved. And it's a tough balancing act to find. And we've got some way to go. Just Paul says, if you set the LUFS, is it better than the host to squash your song as far as music compromise? To be honest, I'm not a mastering engineer. The person you really need to speak to is somebody like my very good friend Darren Smith. He's probably somebody you could talk to, or my other good friend Brandon Ulshouse, or my other good friend Ian Shepherd. Ian Shepherd has been a champion of the loudness kind of thing for a long time. And if you go to productionadvice.co.uk, there is a range of papers that he has authored on the subject of loudness, in particular as it relates to streaming services. And, there's plugins that he has made with plugin manufacturers that actually help you kind of get the best result out of when you upload your music to something like SoundCloud. And then there's the website loudnesspenalty.com as well, which is great, by the way. So if you want to find out, hey, what's my music going to sound like when I upload it to something like SoundCloud or Tidal or YouTube or Amazon, for example. And you can basically, you drag and drop your master into loudnesspenalty.com. It doesn't store it. All it does is just analyze it. And then it will tell you the results, which are how much one of these services is going to turn your music down. And if there is hardly any turning down, like maybe 1 dB, maybe 2 dB at the most, then you're good. You don't have to worry about it. The dynamic range of your music is not really going to be touched at all, to be honest. So loudnesspenalty.com is a fantastic resource, or you can get the Loudness Penalty plugin, I think from Metaplugs, I think it is. And so well worth going into. Just Bob says, good interview material for a show. Yeah, actually, probably. I should probably get Darren on the show to talk specifically mastering and loudness and all of that, and maybe my buddy Ian as well. Ian is probably going to be harder to get hold of because he is much, he's pretty high profile as a mastering engineer. So he's pretty darn busy. Darren, I might be able to get hold of a little bit more easily, but he is a wealth of information anyway, and he has some very, very well researched and thought out arguments on this issue, and quite a lot of which I'm in agreement with. I'm not completely in agreement with him, but I'm mostly in agreement with him. DJ Vu says, I don't know what the problem is, but following these LUFS regimes, other tracks on YouTube have a different volume than mine. That would probably be because of your final output of your master. You can use the LUFS metering in Studio One, either in the effects tab here. You can go down and you can get the I think it's the level meter. HRJKLMNOP level meter. Here we go. And in this, if you go to R128 here, when you're playing your music, if you tap on this here, this option here, this gives you the integrated loudness in LUFS. This is the value that you want to pay close attention to. And you also want to pay close attention to this true peak value. The reason why you need to pay attention to these two is because this is where the action is when it comes to what streaming services do. Now, this is where things get a little bit complicated, because really, as far as I'm concerned, the whole LUFS thing about -14 and all of that, it's not a strict, for me personally, my view is this is not a strict thing. And it shouldn't be implemented as some kind of strict standard whereby everything that goes above this gets knocked down massively. For me, this should be about agreed guidelines that everybody agrees that they will adhere to. That it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's an agreed standard, an agreed guideline as to this is kind of where the integrated loudness of your masters should be for most types of music. Now, this is not every type of music. There are some types of music where your dynamic range is going to be smaller and your integrated loudness is going to be a completely different value, and that is correct for that style of music. I talked about industrial music. And so that would be a case in point where the dynamic range is going to be much smaller, and that's okay. You're not looking for preserving a large dynamic range with something like industrial music because it's not required for that style of music. So what the streaming services will do to your music in terms of limiting, you're probably less concerned about than if you're, just putting out a country pop record. If you're putting out a country pop record, you want to make sure that the dynamic range of that song is preserved as much as possible. And yet, when your music is played before or after an industrial piece of music, that's hardly ever likely to happen, but if it should happen, something like a random playlist player on Amazon or a random playlist player on Tidal or YouTube or even SoundCloud, where this might happen. You want to make sure that your country pop song has the same volume as the industrial track, but it has its dynamic range of 10, 12, 14 dB preserved. And so the only way you're going to do that is by kind of paying attention to this integrated loudness value and your true peak value. So you don't want your true peak value to go like really, really close to 0 dB in a country folk song or country rock song. You don't. You want it to be true peak round about 1 or 1.5 dB negative. The reason being, you don't want to get into sample peaking, which is going to create distortions, digital distortions that you don't want. But then you also want to pay attention to your LUFS value because you want to preserve your dynamic range. And yet your music needs to compete with another piece of music that may be a lot louder ultimately. And if that's the case, you don't want your listener to have to go over to the radio. Let's go old school for a minute and talk about radio airplay. You don't want somebody to have to reach for the volume control to hear your music. That's not a good customer experience. And that's not a good listening experience. Now, in years past, that's what we did. We reached for the volume control, and that was okay. But now, in the 21st century, towards the end of the first quarter of the 21st century, that's not really acceptable. You don't want to have to constantly keep on turning up and turning down, turning up, turning down as you're listening to music. You want the output to be the same all day. You don't ever have to touch that volume control, regardless of whether it's a classical piece, a heavy metal, speed, thrash, screamo, death metal, or a nice little Johnny Cash country ballad. You want all of those to have the same output. So I hope that's kind of made that clear. It's very, very challenging, and it's very, very complicated. And that is why I'm not a mastering engineer, because it's really complicated, and it is essentially a balancing act. It's a very, very delicate, fine balancing act. Just Bob said it'd be cool for streaming sites to list their preferred LUFS so you can match on all streaming fields. Yes, more mixdowns, but best representation on each platform. And that's precisely why the presets were created in export mixdown for the song and also in digital release that I talked about earlier. That's precisely why these were put in. So when you go to song export mixdown, this loudness, adjust loudness thing was put in precisely for that reason. So you don't have to go, I wonder what Apple Music's preferred loudness is. It's here. It's -16 LUFS with a true peak value of -1. It's there. That information is there. And when you have this engaged and you hit OK, your mixdown is going to conform to that so that when you upload it to Apple Music, you know it's going to be fine. That's why it was done. Okay? So you don't have to go looking for that information. But if you want to go looking for that information, it's readily available, which is why, we're able to put together all of these, including some random ones like OP59, which I think is kind of like the Southeast Asian normalization standards. And then, of course, you've got the EBU R128, which is kind of where it all started with loudness management and all of that, because this was the European Broadcasting Union required standard, which it's called R128. And it's called R128 is because that's what the agreement document is titled. It's titled R128. And you can actually find the original EBU R128 paper that made it into the legislation that provided not legislation, but which basically formed the agreement between the European Broadcasting Union. And then, of course, in Australia, it's ever so slightly different. And over in the United States, again, it's also ever so slightly different. But EBU 128, if we look at this one, this is -23 LUFS with a true peak value of -1. Why -23? -23, that is the broadcasting loudness normalization standard for TV and cinema, believe it or not. So Netflix will fall under this. Man, I got a really itchy nose. Sorry, folks. So Netflix will conform to this -23 LUFS. And you're thinking, -23, that's really quiet. Kind of is, but it's to preserve the dynamic range of your music. Perhaps we should design an LUFS with preset 7. Yeah, we certainly should. I totally agree with that. And Billy Morgan has put up his after show Zoom. So if you want to go and join us over there, you are more than welcome to do so. I'm going to go back over to this screen here. Let's see. Wow, my nose is so itchy. I'm going to have to deal with this after show. Sorry, folks. Rich says heavy music, wall of sound music, is achieved in the mixing phase as a process of carving out frequencies to fit more in. Same goes with trailer endings. Yes, absolutely, that's right. That's exactly right. It's all done. It's all done with EQ as much as anything else. So we have 7 or 8 minutes to go. John Lake says movies are either too soft or too loud. Drives me crazy. Now the fun thing about sound for film, and this is the thing that drives me crazy, especially in recent years. This never used to be the case in the past. But all of a sudden, it now is. And I don't know why mixing engineers for TV and film are doing this. But quite often, dialogue is getting buried by other sound design. Even if it's really mundane sound design, like, for example, on a TV soap opera. Let's say there is a conversation between two actors and the scene is in the kitchen. And one of the actors puts down toast into the toaster, and then whilst they're talking, a couple of minutes later, the toast pops up. But the sound of the toast popping up is louder than the two voice tracks. And so for that instant, the two voice tracks get buried underneath this this toaster popping up. And it's so infuriating. I don't know why they do it, but it is so common on TV and on film and in cinema, where the sound design and the Foley effects are really loud and not well balanced against the dialogue tracks. I don't know why that is. I wish I knew. So I'm kind of with you there. Yeah, it's not only you guys. It's definitely a thing. Let's see what else we have. Yeah, Bob, sorry, dude. You're gonna have to probably catch the replay on that one. I'm sorry about that. Wow, really, really good questions. Really, really good questions here tonight. I'm really very much appreciative of the standard of thought and questions that we've got, and the discussion that we've got going on for the first show of the year. I thank you very much. And also, I ask, please let this show set the standard for the rest of the shows this year. It would be totally awesome if every show had this kind of standard of question, because you're getting me to think, you're getting me to study, and you're getting me to, do my research and extend and develop my own learning as well as educating at the same time. And I love that. So thank you, guys. I really appreciate it a lot. And Rich has a great answer here. When we're talking about the minus 23 LUFS for film and TV, he says TV and media music is quieter by design for dialogue, but not only. Ever wonder why the adverts seem louder? Yes. Everybody complains about the adverts being a lot louder. And I always thought that the reason why adverts, commercials on TV are much louder than the actual broadcast of the program is because they know you're going to go to the kitchen and make a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. And they want you to be able to hear that commercial whilst you're in the kitchen. I don't know whether that's a myth. I would not be surprised. The teacher learns by teaching. Quite often that is true. But I like to be as prepared as I possibly can be, so that I've always got a good quality answer for your questions. Now, I try to kind of anticipate what kind of might come up. so I've got something that I can think about very quickly. Because I don't know what you're going to say before you say it, because I don't predict the future. But I try and anticipate a wee bit so that I can be just a wee bit ahead of you. Let's see. Sean, he says here, is going to upgrade to Studio One 6 Professional, which is awesome. He says he's going to do that in the next week or two, and he's excited about that, which is awesome. I'm very glad you're considering upgrading. That's fantastic. What you get in the professional version with Studio One 6 is outstanding. I think the feature set that we have built for the professional version of Studio One has always been really, really good, really outstanding, really great. But I think especially now with version 6, there's such a lot of incredibly cool stuff that when I first got started with Studio One in 2013, when it was Studio One 2.5, it was just a pipe dream. I was thinking, wouldn't it be great? Yes, I was thinking this back then. Wouldn't it be great if there was some way in which I could easily collaborate with somebody and share the Studio One session in such a way that I could just upload files from the song on my computer to the song on my collaborator's computer, and vice versa. So we're basically just sending audio files back and forth, working essentially in the same song. And I thought, wow, wouldn't that be awesome to be able to do that? I really didn't care which DAW came up with it, but I thought, wouldn't that be fantastic? And now here we are with Studio One 6, and with the integration with Persona Sphere, you now have that with a workspace. And you can directly update the song that you're both working on without ever having to leave the song. It's freaking awesome. So yeah, that is definitely a huge reason to upgrade. Let's see. And of course, Alps Media is saying that he can help with the upgrade. Absolutely. If you are considering upgrading to Studio One version 6, or you are upgrading from artist to professional, Louis at Alps Media is the guy to go to, because he will give you a fantastic deal. He really will. Also, if you're looking for PreSonus hardware, an interface like the AudioBox Go, or what I have, which is the 1824C, or you're after a Quantum, or you want to get some PreSonus speakers to replace ones that you've already got, anything like that. Again, Louis at Alps Media is the guy to go see, especially if you're in the United States. If you're in the United States and North America, he can help you out. If you're in kind of Europe, probably not so much, because I think maybe shipping might be an issue there. But otherwise, I think Louis is definitely the guy to go to. All right, so we are at the end of the show, and we're going to finish with this comment here that John Hawk has made. And he says, the chord track is priceless. It absolutely is. The chord track is a work of genius. And I know who created the chord track. I know them personally. They are a personal friend of mine. And I did kind of help out a wee bit with when we were still developing it. I did help out a wee bit with suggestions and that kind of thing. So it all came together really, really well. And it's actually way better than I thought it was going to be. I'll be honest. John Hawk says, I want a Quantum, but I have to raise the money. Yeah. If you're after something like a Quantum, then Louis is the guy to go see. And even if you have to raise the money, he will definitely help you out, especially if you are in the United States. And on that note, if you are up for joining us all over on the after show Zoom, then please do hit that Zoom link that Billy has just posted. And Sean is going to be there. Louis hopefully is going to be there. And I'm going to be there for at least a little while. I have work at Personas tomorrow, but I'm going to be there as well. So on that note, folks, I'm going to bid you all a very, very good night. And again, sincerely, a very happy new year to everybody. And thank you for all of your questions in 2022 and for a great, great start to 2023 for Sunday Night Live. Thanks a lot, guys, and I will see you on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified with Jonny Guy. Hopefully, probably pretty likely now that going forward, it's going to be hosted by Jonny on his channel, and it will be at 7 p.m. Central Time, not 6 p.m. like it used to be. It is now 7 p.m. Central. That's 1 a.m. UK, 2 a.m. Central Europe. So if that's what you are after, if you're into songwriting and want to learn more about it, Jonny and I co-host the show. Come on over. Go and subscribe to the Jonny Guy channel, and we'll see you there on Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central. Until then, folks, good night.